Are your doors locked tonight? Are your windows shuttered and locked? Do you feel safe within the walls of your home? Even if you said yes to all the above, something may still be able to snatch you away and perform all sorts of experiments on you. Bob Mitchell is our guest this evening, and Bob is a Canadian author and journalist. He's covered crime and sports for the Toronto Star for more than 35 years. He is the author of 6 books, including 2 UFO books. Tonight, we will be discussing Bob's latest book titled Intrusion: Alien Encounters. In this book, Bob shares the stories of 4 individuals whose lives have been forever altered for better or worse. And without further ado, Bob, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure to be on your show. That introduction, I was just thinking, everybody that I talked to in the book, locking their doors didn't do one thing, because everybody said they came through the windows or came through the walls or came through someplace in their house. So locking your doors doesn't matter one bit.
No, it does not. I had my own experiences when I was a child, and they came through the damn walls of my bedroom. Nothing can protect you.
No, they can. If they want you, they'll come to you.
That's frightening. That there's nothing that you can do to prevent an abduction.
Absolutely. I mean, the people I talked to, not only was there nothing they could do, once it happens, you lose complete control of any sense you have. You are taken over completely. You can experience it and you can see them in some cases, but your mind isn't your own anymore. They control everything.
Mm-hmm. My own story, and I'm telling you this because of the going through walls segment, it took place when I was about 5 or so years of age. Mostly what I remember is something came and got me, took me out from the bedroom walls, and then I remember floating above the tree line, and the trees were moving around just like a heavy wind was blowing around them.
Mm.
And then the next thing I remember is waking up in bed beside my brother, because we shared the same bedroom at that point, and I asked him, "Bubba, why did you let them take me?" But whatever it was, they put us back into the bed together, but on the opposite side where we should have been.
Did he get taken too?
As far as he knows, he did not. He remembers it happening.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, did he remember it?
He remembers more of this than I do. To me, it's more like looking into a broken mirror and you get bits and pieces of it. But he actually remembers trying to wake Dad up, and Dad would not wake up whatsoever. So he went outside and he saw a craft hovering above the house, hovering above the trees. That's what he remembers. And then the next thing he knew, we were back in bed together.
Yeah, it's quite common when things are happening to you that other people who they're not happening to, they're fast asleep or they just can't be woken up. That seems to be quite common to even the 4 people that I interviewed. There was other people around them, but they couldn't wake them up when they knew they were having some kind of experience.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think they control your environment. They control everything. And I mean, whatever they are, whether they're from outer space or interdimensional beings, I don't know. But if they want to make you part of an experience, it's only you and you alone at that time. Very rarely is it like a multiple experience. Although I think what sometimes if you're having an experience and there's other people there, they're all experiencing the same thing you're experiencing, but people who are with them aren't experiencing it. So they seem to target individuals rather than groups of individuals.
Mm-hmm. For 35 years, you were a journalist covering both crime and sports stories.
Right.
What was that transition like for you, going from one side of journalism to the far side of journalism?
I would say it was very smooth because I had left the paper in May of 2013 and had decided, I wanted to do something else and wanted to, one of the things I wanted to do was write a book on UFOs. I always was interested in the subject, but I didn't want to write a book that was just talking about people seeing lights in the sky. I wanted to find somebody who actually experienced something and write my own version of, say, Barney and Betty Hill or Travis Walton, something like that. But I never thought I would. I couldn't imagine how I would even locate these people or find these people. And it was a kind of a coincidence. One of my freelance articles, I tried to find a UFO investigator in the area that I was living in, and I couldn't find any. So I called MUFON and asked if they had any in Brantford, Ontario. That's where I live, which is about 100 miles west of Toronto right now. And they said, "Oh yeah, sure, we've got lots." And then they put me in touch with the Ontario director, who was Stu Bundy at the time, and it turned out there wasn't anybody else in my area. So one thing led to another, and I became I joined MUFON and became a field investigator. Still not, thinking I would ever meet anybody, because I thought basically I'd be just looking at lights in the sky like everybody else. But we had this one meeting in my hometown where I thought we'd get about 15 people showing up at a coffee shop, and instead we ended up having more than 70 people, and many of those people had experiences. They seemed to be drawn to that meeting for some reason and wanted to express things that had been hidden all their lives, and they didn't have nobody to talk to. And from that meeting, I met 3 of the 4 people that I did the book on, and it sort of continued. They had put me in touch with other people, and I sort of became their psychologist and a psychiatrist, I guess, and a good listener at the time. But I found it very intriguing, and it's led me to a whole other career right now.
It certainly has. I've read your book. It's a fascinating read, just to know some of the stories of these individuals and I'm not sure that you would say torture, because in some of the cases, in many of the cases, they kind of felt like these individuals, these aliens, were friendly toward them, or someone that they had known before.
Yeah, that was particularly with the praying mantis mantid type creatures, which is really strange to me, because I've said this before, that if I'm standing in my living room or in a hallway and suddenly an 8-foot tall creature that looks like a giant insect is standing beside me with these big eyes, I'm going to try to run the hell out of there. I'm not going to think that this is a friend. But the surprising thing about it is that 2 of the 4 people that I interviewed, they had experiences that they remember with mantids, and they each had the same feeling, that they had known these creatures all their lives, and they had a deep love for them for some reason, and that the creatures had a love for them, almost a parent to a child love. Of course, one of the people that I talked to, Kelly McLean in the book, she, even though she had this great love for the creature that she saw, she knows that whatever these are, they control your whole environment. So she's not even sure if the love was real. I mean, it could have been something that was just planted in her mind to make her think that she was, very happy to be with them. But in the other instance, when the Greys or the extraterrestrial biological entities, EBs, came in, there was strictly a lot of terror. But the mantids always seemed to be very nice to be around, and they longed to be around them again.
Mm-hmm. I'm right there with you. If I woke up and I saw an insect-like creature, a mantid, staring right at me, I think the first thing I'd be doing, I'd be running away, getting a can of Raid and spraying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. I mean, I'm trying to think of what would be more scary, having, gray aliens at the foot of your bed, or this 8-foot creature at the foot of your bed. And I kind of think the tall one would seem a little more menacing, but it particularly, there's a lot in the book. Some of them had the exact same feeling about the Greys, that they were so thin, and thin necks, thin arms, that they could really, snap their necks if they wanted to. They even though they were afraid of them, they felt that they could somehow get free of the grip that they were under, that they could just, do some damage to them. But of course they never can, because they control everything about you.
Yes. Since we're on the topic of the Greys, there's been one idea that's come around multiple times while I've been doing the show. That is, the Gray aliens are the equivalent of worker ants. Some have gone as far as to say that these aliens are a synthetic breed of harvesters.
Yeah, I've heard that, and that seems to be a theory that's getting more and more steam. And that, in fact, they are not from out of this world, but actually were created on Earth, maybe 200,000 years ago by, if you believe the theory of the Anunnaki, as worker biological entities, and that they're still here, but they have technology, but they can't, they can't go anywhere because they're not from anywhere else but here. So I think that's, a very intriguing theory, and I think that there's a good possibility that that's the correct way. But at the same time, we call everything grays, and I've been more and more thinking that grays are maybe a generic term for several different species that look like grays, because the ebes tend to be grays too, but sometimes they don't have the big oval eyes. They have very squinty eyes, and they have very wrinkly skin, not smooth skin, but people all call them all the same thing. So perhaps it's like humans, where there's all these different nationalities: Caucasian, black, Indian, and we call them all humans. Maybe the same thing is with grays.
Mm-hmm. I know there are grays, whether you want to call them grays or not. There are mantids, and there are reptilian aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what other types of aliens are there? I know about those three.
Well, the four people that I talked to had never seen any reptilians in any of their encounters, but they did see another species. I guess I have to call it species because they had cloaks like monks. Some of them were tall, some of them were very small, and they were very menacing looking. I think when they looked at them, they didn't see any features, just this dark, foreboding, maybe blackness inside when they were looking at their faces. One of the girls, ladies that I talked to, Jackie Reiser, she actually saw a very, very small toad-like being covered in a monk's cloak, and she could actually see the gnarly teeth and the black squinty eyes. So there may even be different types of those too. I do know there's another person who is not in the book that I've been dealing with, a mother and daughter, and they've never seen a gray. They've seen reptilians, and but their most horrific encounters have always been with these cloaked figures who come into their bedrooms at night and literally drag them screaming from the bed. So I don't know what they are, but they're troll-like, cloaked, monk-like creatures.
Reading your book, one thing really stood out among everything to me that was in it, and that was the ability of these aliens, or at least one species of these aliens, to control our perception of them, our perception of their ship. I mean, they could come across to look like a family member, and their ship may be a circus or a house or a horse or something like that.
Absolutely, and I think one of the reasons they do that is they somehow are able to penetrate into our subconsciousness, and they know what makes us happy, they know what makes us fearful. And two of the four people that I talked to, they had encounters evolving around the topic of Christmas. One of the ladies actually thought she saw a log cabin with Christmas lights all decorated around it, and then the more she looked at it, she thought it was a restaurant with Christmas lights, and it was very inviting, and she wanted to go into it. And another lady, Jackie Reiser, she actually saw Christmas trees floating across the lake towards her. And I guess, if you see that, you're not going to be, fearful. You're going to be, very curious about it. And of course, when we get closer and you get into it, you find out that you're not looking at a Christmas situation. You're actually looking at a spaceship that's been, I guess, disguised or made it to look like in your mind as a Christmas tree or a house decorated with Christmas lights. Because what else is less threatening than Christmas to youngsters?
Exactly. And at the same time that they show a Christmas tree to someone, would they also show something to another person that's with that person that the other individual has no interest in, so they wouldn't go toward it?
I think that's a possibility. I mean, the ones I dealt with, there wasn't multiple people involved. It was only one people at the same time, and the other people were fast asleep. So I can't say what other people would have seen. Although Kelly McLean mentioned years later that her brother was on his deathbed, and her brother was with her in the car the first time when she had her first encounter, and she couldn't wake him up. He was sound asleep, and when she had the experience, and years later, when he was dying on his deathbed, she asked him, do you remember something funny? Did you see a restaurant with Christmas lights back when we were youngster on the Ridge Route? And this was a guy that was, totally bedridden, could hardly move, in the last dying parts of pancreatic cancer. And he just shot up in bed and looked at her and said, "I don't remember that, but I remember all the flashing lights around the ambulances." So, they thought the father went to see this area because he thought a small plane had crashed. So maybe they made it look like there was ambulances taking out the survivors of a small plane crash.
Yeah.
But to her, he was sound asleep in the car and never came anywhere near the craft that she was in. So, but it's a good point. I'm sure they can control the environment of one person. They can control the environment of anybody who's anywhere near there, even to the point of not even seeing anything.
Yes. It seems like they're creating these mirages for us, for something that we would relapse to, so we can put down our barriers, etc. Because when we are feeling safe, that's when we're technically more vulnerable than otherwise.
Yeah, and when you're feeling safe, you feel nobody's out to hurt you. And even if they are hurting you, you're not really maybe aware that they're hurting you, and they're controlling your mind that way. And as Kelly McLean said, is the experience she had as kids, did it really happen that way, or is she only meant to remember it that way? Because maybe what really happened is far too horrific to even think about.
What percentage of these individuals that you spoke with thought at first that this might have been a dream?
Oh, I think they all did, except when they were kids. When they were kids, I don't think they really think that way. When you get to be an adult, I think that's when you start thinking that what you experience has to be a dream, because it couldn't possibly be real. And but then when it happens over and over again, you start wondering if it's a dream or not. And then you start, having little hints that maybe it's not a dream, and then you don't know what to say, because they all thought they were going crazy at one point. And they didn't want to tell anybody, because who's going to believe them? But then as they, have these experiences over and over again, I think they just sort of come to the grips that, it's happening to me, and I don't care if anybody believes me or not. I know it's true.
What does your experience tell you about the overall scale of abductions? Are we talking about 1 out of every 1,000 people, or what is that number in your opinion?
Well, I've had this theory that's just sort of evolved in my mind recently, and I've been trying to think about the truth embargo and whether disclosure is going to happen sooner or not, and trying to figure out why it hasn't happened since now. And so let's assume that, I've heard figures something like 1 million people in the United States go missing every year, and who knows how many people go missing around the world. But let's just stick with the United States for a second. So 1 million people go missing, and some of them are found. Some of them run away just because they want to run away. Some of them are hiding from authorities, so they have their own reasons for going. Some of them, unfortunately, end up being killed, murdered, and their bodies are dumped. And some of them are, victims of serial killers. But where are all the other people that never come back? And I'm trying to figure out did they just vanish off the face of the earth? They had to have gone somewhere. And if 1 million people are going missing every year, you're talking over the last 50 years, how many people have gone missing. So one of the theories going around that I've been hearing about the Greys is that they're the only ones that are actually doing the abductions, and that if you believe some ufologists, that 40 years ago that the Greys made a deal with the world governments to allow people to be abducted and returned to giving them the technological advances that we have today. So that's maybe why no government has come forward yet to announce that they're around, because what a public relations nightmare that would be. How do you explain that in return for having the big screen TV you've got now and the cell phone you've got and that can power more things than a big computer did 50 years ago? You've got these things, but the trade-off is that we've allowed alien species to abduct people, to conduct experiments on them, and maybe in some cases use them as a food source. How do you ever explain that to the general population? So I don't know how many people have been abducted, but I know that not everyone who's been abducted probably has come back. The ones that have come back, maybe they've come back because they use them for different purposes. Mm-hmm. But it's a thought. I have nothing to prove it, but it's just another thought that's out there.
This has me thinking back years ago as well. It probably took place a year or two after that event I told you about. And I remember waking up with a mission in my mind. It was almost as if my body was being controlled by someone else, but I was wide awake. So I was being told to go and tell my parents goodbye. We're talking early in the morning. I went into my parents' bedroom, told my mom bye, my dad bye, and I was heading out that door. They stopped me, but I wonder to this day where I was going to and what would have happened to me had I just went.
Yeah, I think they also test us psychologically to see who is a good candidate. If you fight back, they sometimes may not want to take you every time, or maybe sometimes they're kind of intrigued about how strong you are, how much you fight back. Maybe they try to find people that are the weakest that don't fight back, and they know they can control them more. I do believe they do psychological experiments just to see what our reaction is, because otherwise they would just come and take us without any scenarios.
Mm-hmm. But that moment, that just came to mind, and I wonder how many of the missing children might have experienced the same thing, and they either told their parents bye, but their parents weren't able to wake up, or they just went straight on. Yeah,
and they never came back.
Yeah.
And their pictures are in milk cartons now, and because where did they go? I mean, there's not a million serial killers out there. Have to have gone somewhere.
Exactly.
And that's the big thing. If our governments do know where they've gone, how the hell did they ever come clean to the public? And, I just don't know how they do that. That's the greatest public relation nightmare in the history of mankind, I think, to be able to explain that in a way that people would understand.
Mm-hmm. Now, you had mentioned how some of the people that you interviewed had felt a feeling of love for some of their abductors, and that this love was returned. Do you think it might be possible that these individuals might have been hybrids and that they were children on board of crafts before?
Well, that is an intriguing theory, because the two of the people for sure felt a strong connection, and they all said, each of them said to me that throughout their life at some point didn't belong. They just wondered. They just didn't feel the same all the time. And so maybe that's a possibility. I do know, that three of them believe that they had experiments done on them, and that they did have their eggs taken, and that hybrid children were created from them. But the first instance of that really is very strange for Kelly McLean, because she was only 10 years old when she was actually given an infant to hold when she was on one craft. And so that could not have been her child at 10 years old. She still can't figure out what the purpose was to show them that child, unless it was to prepare her for down the road, where she knew there was a connection there and that this would be something that would be normal to her as she grew into adulthood. But the other ones definitely have memories of holding, child and knowing it was their offspring.
Mm-hmm.
But being a part hybrid, that's a very interesting theory. I wouldn't rule out anything.
Mm-hmm. The thought that she was there with holding this child at 10 years of age, that actually, that makes me wonder if that might have been a sibling of that person, and that her mother might have also been an experiencer.
Well, soon after her first experience of being on a craft and seeing aliens, she tells a story of where she gets into bed and she's frightened, and she sees what looks like a gray in the ceiling, and she sees the grays in the sky when she's outside, like they're looking down at her, and she's very, very scared. So she gets into bed, and the mother gets into bed to comfort her, and she has this weirdest sensation and fear in her mind, thinking, what if this isn't my mother?
Mm-hmm.
And this was after she had just had also an experience with the mantids, who she felt great love for. She never told her mother about that, and it took several months for that feeling to go away, but eventually it did go away. But it was strange that she had that feeling. And the other thing that was strange about her growing up is that there were two different people that wanted to take her away from her parents and raise her. For some strange reason, there was a couple that lived on Edwards Air Force Base, which is, people who follow this know that that's always been connected with UFOs. And they wanted to take her away from her parents, and they said they'd, raise her and give her the finest schooling and teach her everything. And then there was another Oriental woman who ran a host of beauty salons in Los Angeles, and she took a liking to her too, and she wanted to take her away and give her the finest education possible, which seemed to be very strange to her, and she has no idea why both these two families wanted to take her, and she didn't even know them. They were just people that her father had worked for. So it's interesting.
It is, to say the least.
And they're all really adopted too. Like 3 of them were adopted. So, and all four of them had near-death experiences too during their life.
Really?
So I don't know what connection that is either.
Huh. I've never heard about that connection, near-death experiences and alien abductions.
Yeah, either have I. But we used a hypnotist for 2 of them, and he started wondering too whether there's any connection there, and he's going to try to look into it a little more. But it's just something that seemed kind of odd to me when I didn't know they were adopted, and I didn't know they had near-death experiences till I started talking and interviewing them.
Yes. One theory that's out there is that at least a certain race of aliens could be related to angels, what people view as angels. And I'm just wondering, with the ability to create mirages, to create environments for the mind, if these individuals, these aliens, could have came across as angels.
Well, back 2,000 years ago, that was what they would have thought was coming down from the sky. So angels were something they were familiar with. It was more a religious time back then. Today, I don't think people, think of angels the first thing that comes into their mind. So who knows? Back then, they're looking at something, and to them, the greatest thing in the world is an angel coming down, a religious symbol. Today, it's a Christmas tree. So, or it's somebody that looks like, even though it's looks like a giant insect, you feel nothing but love for them.
Yes.
Certainly, none of the talked to thought there were angels involved. Although one of the ladies, Kelly McLean, she did think she was having a paranormal experience the first time as an adult when she was terrorized in her bedroom by what she thought originally might have been a ghost, but then found out that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. One thing I remember from reading your book was that Kelly McLean, I believe her name is, was shown an event of the past where thousands of individuals was lined up at a white pyramid, and they were going through what was later revealed to her as a portal, and they were going underground because the civilization, their world, has become entirely unlivable.
Yeah, and something was going to happen to make it even worse.
Yeah.
So
and that just makes me wonder if that might have been Mars.
That's what I thought originally when she told me too, because that's always been a theory that's out there that we're descendants of Mars, and they came to Earth afterwards, and the portal in that pyramid were the portals back in Egypt, or not necessarily Egypt, but wherever there's a pyramid all around the world. Yeah, I thought that too, and the being that was telling her this, she or he, I don't know, I can't remember now if it was a he or she, but told her that there was nothing that they could do. It was going to happen. It was a fait complete, and then what she was seeing had happened already, so she was nothing to be worried about, at least for what they were experiencing. But he did give her an omen about what was going to happen on Earth, that we were going to experience starting in the year 2000, upheaval, social upheaval, famine, political upheaval, weather patterns were going to change, and of course all those things are starting to go on now, and it was going to continue and get worse until the year 2050, which something cataclysmic was going to happen here on Earth, but then when it happened, everything was going to be fine afterwards. So who knows what that would be. Perhaps it's the same thing that happened on Mars, and then where do we go from there?
Yes. Well, what's the possibility that they didn't come from Mars, but they're coming from our future?
Well, that's another. I mean, the Jim Wilson Forest, where when he touches the craft, it comes down, and then later he goes under hypnosis, and they say that they're here to get some Band-Aids because they are us in the future. I mean, there's so many theories there, and all correct. I mean, who says that some of the people coming here are not from our future, but other beings from another galaxy, another existence? Everything could be happening all at the same time.
Yes. There's one thing I'm missing with all these alien species and alien encounters. There is not a tall, green, female alien, just like in Star Trek. There's not one.
Well, apparently the reptilians, you can tell the difference between the male and female. I don't know what that is, but I'm told you can tell them very clearly, but I can't imagine it looks like the green alien from Star Trek or the green alien. I just actually saw the movie last night, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
It doesn't look like Zoe Saldana. So, yeah, well, other than the fact that some people have seen the Nords, and they say people look exactly like us. So, who knows? Maybe those ones do look like us.
Yes. This was a dream I had, but it also has to do with aliens. And I looked down by the barn, and there by the barn I saw Pegasus, the winged horse. So I went down there to it, and as soon as I got down to Pegasus, it turned into a ship, and there was a humanoid-looking person. He looked like us, except he was bald and short. I forgot exactly what he was telling me, but I got on the ship, and we headed above to the Pegasus constellation. And it was a month later where a new planet was discovered in the Pegasus constellation.
So how old were you when this was happening?
I can't really tell you an exact year when this happened, but I do know it took place either in the early or mid-90s.
I wonder the Pegasus, if you were you studying ancient Greek in school, or?
No, I was not.
So they didn't really, you didn't have any thoughts like that in your mind.
I
So they
had
could show you something.
absolutely no thoughts about that. And what blew my mind, like I said, is when this new planet was discovered in the Pegasus constellation or close to it.
Wow.
That's hard to explain.
Another intriguing memory from your past. And it's you having these experiences, you must be able to relate a lot to people that I've written about.
Oh, I certainly can. And I do have to wonder if it goes back to the family, to the past, because even with my mother, when she went in for some sort of operation on her nose, they did an x-ray, and there around her nose, eye socket nose area, there was a metal shaped BB type of device. And the doctor asked her, when did you stick a BB up your nose? And she never did.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary Ann Anderson, the deaf experiencer that I interviewed, she went to a dentist just recently, and there's a picture of it in the book where there's a little, I won't say sliver, but it's a cylindrical thing that's in the right part of her jaw, and the dentist asked her the same thing, like what is this? And she says, she didn't know. She was hoping he would know what it was, and she has no memory of what it's doing there. And she also had something taken out of her nose when she was a kid. She used to have a lot of bloody noses. Mm-hmm. And she went to the doctor, and they did an operation, and they found something metal in there, too. She doesn't know what became of that metal thing, but, that happens quite a bit, too.
Oh, yes, it does. I know that you and your wife had your own experience. Do you think that either of you were abducted?
I never thought so at the time. The only reason I even think about it now is because talking to the people that I've talked to, they had similar things happen to them. And when you were telling me at the beginning when the wind was blowing, that was something that happened to me. Just for our listeners, I'll just tell you what happened. It was about 10 years ago, and my wife and I used to always sit out in the backyard anyways, listening to late night shows like yourself and Coast to Coast and things like that. And so we were familiar with, the topic. But on that night, my wife worked as an assisted living person in a nearby home, and she worked the night shift. So she came home a little after midnight and was winding down and watching some TV. I had to get up early in the morning, so I went to bed, and this was in the summer. It was, a fairly nice day, and all of a sudden around 2 o'clock in the morning, we think it was, my wife heard this very strong rumbling sound, as if like a storm was brewing, and it was just, or a train was coming through, but there wasn't any trains near us. And she looked out the front window, and she first looked up in the sky, and the sky was all pitch black, except that right in the middle there was this white funnel that seemed to be opening a hole in the sky. And then all of a sudden, all the furniture started blowing around out front, and the garbage cans started blowing down our driveway, and she came and got me to wake me up. And I'm a pretty light sleeper, and that night I must have slept better than I had in my entire life, because she could hardly wake me up. And when she did wake me up, I was kind of drowsy, but she dragged me out, and I looked out the front window, and everything was apparently blowing everywhere. Now, the interesting thing about it is I had no recollection of being taken out of bed, woken up, and looking out the front window. But I do remember going out in the backyard after hearing the same thing in the backyard while she was out the front. So I go in the backyard, and the patio furniture is just blowing everywhere. And it was like we were inside a mini tornado, except I wasn't blowing, and I wasn't cold. I don't remember. I remember everything blowing around, but I don't remember wind in my face or anything. But the other thing I do remember is that it was bright light, like daylight outside. And for some reason, I never looked up to see what was making the bright light. I remember gathering up the patio furniture and getting it all, back where it should have been, and the back gate was flying open. I remember locking it. My wife tells me she came into the backyard to see if she could help me, and she said I was engulfed in a bluish white light.
Huh.
And that's the kind of thing that everybody says, bluish white light is involved in abductions. But I don't remember the bluish light. I just remember it being daylight. And then I remember coming in, and she says we sat on the couch for a few minutes to discuss what was going on. I had no recollection of that. And then I went back to bed as if nothing had happened. And the next morning I got up, and I thought I had this dream last night. And so I went out to the kitchen and I said, did I get up in the middle of the night? Were we outside doing all this? And she said, yeah, we were outside. It was like a tornado was going on, but there wasn't any rain. And I thought, well, that was kind of weird. And I remember asking the neighbors the next day, and they didn't know what I was talking about. and our houses were, fairly close together. There was a driveway between houses, and across the street, people, and they didn't see anything. And I never thought anything more about it. Just it was a very strange event. But when I'm talking to the people that I'm talking to now, when they tell me about this blue light, I don't know, but my wife insisted I didn't go anywhere. So whether they changed their mind or was looking for somebody else that night, and I just got caught in the beam, or that may be the only other explanation. But it was certainly a strange occurrence that I can't explain.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the cover of your book, Intrusion Alien Encounters, and I guess this is a drawing of the mantid.
That Jackie Reiser remembers seeing.
Okay, it almost looks like it has a beak.
Yeah, she said that too. And when she drew that for me, she kept apologizing because she said in her mind it has a beak, but she knows it couldn't have had a beak. But she says it had this beak there, and she had to draw it, even though part of her mind tells her there was no beak, but part of her mind tells her it was a beak. And she, for some reason, knew that was a male, whereas the one that Kelly McLean experienced, she knew it was a female. Mm-hmm. And a very, very old female, too. Mm. But they both were 8 feet tall.
Yes.
And Kelly has looked at this. She drew her own. Kelly was not as great a drawer as Jackie, so they don't exactly look the same. But when Kelly saw this picture, she said, well, that's more like what I saw. But she just couldn't draw it that way.
Mm. I know during the days of the ancient Native Americans that they also experienced some sort of being that they called, I believe it was the ant people.
Yeah. And the ant people are supposedly Greys or Ebes. That's at least what I'm told, because Kelly happened to be, she had never been to the Grand Canyon before, but in one of her experiences, she was flying over the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. But years later, her and her husband went to the Grand Canyon to visit, and they stopped in a Hopi Indian store there, and she was looking in the at all the trinkets, and apparently they have two different kind of trinkets. I haven't been there, so I may be explaining this wrong, but they have the trinkets for sale at one price, and the really old stuff they'll still sell you, but it's at a far more expensive price. And when she's looking in that cabinet, she sees a trinket with a gray alien head on it. And she was completely floored by it and asked the store owner, what's this doing here? And he said, oh, that's part of our history. They're the ant people. So to them, the ant people are the Greys, and in their history, the ant people saved them from two different cataclysms that happened many, many thousands of years ago, where they spent time underground while the Great Flood happened, and there was an ice age that happened. So it's in their history.
Yeah.
They certainly believe it. And in the area I live in, Brantford here, we live close to the Six Nations Indian Reservation, and there's a great belief out here about the Sky people, and I'm told that they can actually call them, and every summer they do call them back, and spaceships land. So I'm looking forward to next summer trying to go out there and being part of that, see if I can join them. But almost every day when I talk to people in the Brantford area, they all have a story to tell. The Brantford area seems to be a complete hotbed of UFOs that have been here for years and years, and they're still coming.
I would be kicked out probably because I'd be singing, "They're coming to take me away."
Well, you think you would, but when it happens, you just either you're so awestruck, or you're you can't do anything. Jackie, she recounts that every time something happened to her, she had so many questions, wanted to ask so many questions and yell and scream at them, and then but she never did. And then when the experience is over, she's kicking herself for not asking it, because she wants to ask it, but something prevents her from expressing herself when she's in their presence. So again, they control the scenario, they control everything about you.
And that is definitely scary. I had another individual on the show, and he talked about how some of these ships, they are transparent on the inside, and they can show you a projection, if you will, of space, maybe even of their own home galaxy.
Yeah, Kelly McLean, when she was on, she thought it was a house. She went into, and that's when she had the first experience with the mantids. One of the walls just sort of became translucent, and interesting. When this has happened to all three of the four people that I talked to, they described it exactly the same way, that it looked like a rippling wall of water that just was, in front of them until it became a clear, giant, big screen TV. And, they were shown the universe. They were shown outer space, basically, even though, as far as they were concerned, they hadn't even left the ground. And they were also shown visions of the future, of what was going to happen on Earth. How they're able to do that, I don't know. And certainly you can't see it from if you're on the ground and you're looking at a spaceship, you're seeing the solid matter, but when you're in the spaceship, you're not. And nobody ever saw any control panels or anything like that. They just sort of wave their hand and it happens.
I was asked to talk to you about UFOs, different shaped UFOs. An individual on the forum I run saw a triangular shaped UFO, and we also were talking about the different species of aliens. If some of them might live on our planet, if some might live in other places of the galaxy, but also if some may be living in the multiverse.
We don't know where they're coming from. Are they coming from the multiverse? Are they coming from interdimensional? Or are they coming from outer space? Or are they coming from right here on Earth, and they've been here for 200,000 years? And their mode of traffic is, a spaceship, but not really going in outer space. They're just, traveling around the Earth's atmosphere. The interesting thing in the three of the four people that I talked to, when they saw a spacecraft, it was what you would think a flying saucer looked like from, any movie you've seen. They didn't see anything that looked cylinder. They didn't see anything that looked like a triangle or anything else except, Kelly once saw a thing that looked like an ice cube. But other than that, when she sees them, they're round like a flying saucer, which is interesting because a lot of people today are seeing all shapes of things, particularly the black triangles. But, are the black triangles, our stuff?
Yeah.
Or is it their stuff? Who knows? But, when people do see some of the black triangles, they're talking about things that look the size of football stadiums or shopping malls. So they're huge. Where we would keep something like that, I have no idea. And how we keep it a secret, I have no idea. But certainly there's a lot of smaller black triangles around here that could easily be our technology, because they sort of do look like stealth bombers too.
I once asked my cousin when he was still in the Air Force about UFOs, and his response to me was, ours, I can't talk about. Theirs, they're crazy. Yeah. I think everybody who knows somebody in the military has a similar experience where they're not allowed to say anything, but by not saying anything, they sort of
give you that little wink, wink, and
They say quite a bit.
But they can't say anything until they retire, and then all kinds of people come out and say things.
Mm-hmm. Your first book about UFOs was something called Incident at Pleasant Ridge, a Canadian UFO mystery. What was that about?
Well, that was my first introduction, because at that first meeting that I mentioned earlier we had in Brantford, even before the meeting started, everybody was talking about this craft that landed in a farmer's tobacco field back in 1974, and I had never heard of it, and because I grew up in the Toronto area, so I'd only been in Brantford for 3 or 4 years, so it was completely new to me. But everybody there seemed to know about it, and it was such a, they even knew the people that were involved, and they said, oh yeah, it happened on Joe Border's farm, and we all know about that. So I thought, well, this might be an interesting thing to write a book on, and so I started doing research and quickly found out that 99% of the people involved are dead, including Joe Border, whose field it was. So it was really hard to find out anything live, so anybody who could tell me the story. So I had to go back in newspaper clippings, and even then there wasn't much. But essentially the story is that he has a tobacco farm, Joe Border, just south of town, in a town called Mount Pleasant, and he's out one day and he sees a shiny metallic thing sitting in his tobacco field, and the first thing that enters his mind is that he's seeing a flying saucer, and he goes to get a closer look at it, and suddenly a thought comes into his mind, and the thought essentially is, there's nothing here, go back home, go to your chores, nothing here to see, it's just a tanker spraying your field. And he turns around and continues his chores, and that's the end of it for that day. It wasn't until 2 days later, when he's out on the field, actually, trying to cultivate the tobacco crops, that he comes across. It wasn't quite a crop circle, but it was an area about 20 feet in diameter, 20 to 40 feet in diameter, where all this crop was burnt, and it was bent over, and there was a ooey, purplish liquid film all on the ground. And so in his mind, he's thinking to himself, damn it, he says, that was a flying saucer that I seen. He says, well, why did I think it was a tanker truck? And he starts thinking, well, there's no tracks to even get in here. Like, how would a tanker truck even get in here without leaving tracks? And even if it wasn't here, I didn't hire anybody to come do my spraying that day. So he's excited, and he tries to think who he can call. But before he can call anybody, suddenly a limo shows up on his property, with a black limo with Arizona license plates. So that's pretty strange in itself. How would a car with an Arizona license plates come 3,000 miles up to Canada? And they drive onto his property to the spot where this thing landed, and he goes to go out again to talk to them, and again, in his mind, there's nothing here, go back in your house, don't bother us, just go to your chores, and he turns around and does that.
Wow.
But he hasn't told anybody this has happened yet. So the first question is, how do they know that something's there? And of course they leave, and after they leave, he remembers that this car was there, and so he calls his brother, and his brother at the time is I guess the equivalent of a district attorney in Canada, which is a crown attorney, and well-known, established in the city. And he tells him the story, and he says, what should I do? He says, well, call the provincial police. So he does, and they come out, and they look at the thing, and they take samples, and they interview people near the farm, and nobody's seen anything. And the brother comes out later on that day, and he takes his own sample of this gooey liquid. And he believes his brother. He says he's got no reason not to believe his brother, but he takes the samples, drives them himself down to Toronto to the forensic laboratory, hands the samples over to the intake person, and says, can you examine this, tell me what it is, and get back to me. So a few days later, he calls up, and lo and behold, they don't know what he's talking about. There are no such samples, and there never has been any samples. Now, this is the Crown Attorney. He knows he put the samples there, and suddenly they've disappeared. And also that same day, 3 investigators, 2 from the Buffalo area, 1 from Southern Ontario, show up unannounced on the farm. And you got to remember, he hasn't reported this to anybody yet. He hasn't told any of the press. He hasn't told anybody but his brother and the forensic science people. But suddenly these 3 UFO investigators, who claim to be UFO investigators, want to see the area, so he takes it out to them. And while they're out in the area, they hear this electronic female voice that seems to be repeating everything that they're saying. And it seems to be coming from far away on the field. And they get spooked by it. They go back to the house, and they have some coffee, and then they take off. So it's not till the next day that he actually calls the newspapers and tells what's happened. So, but he doesn't think, like, how do they know this until afterwards? It's that part is very strange, that the material collected disappears. And there's a famous ufologist in Canada called Henry McKay. I'm not sure if you know him or not, but he was around for many, many years and did a life, investigating things. And he tried for more than a decade to get information on this case from all levels of the Canadian government. And he was a close friend of Donald Kehoe from Project Blue Book. And of course, this happened after Project Blue that closed down. So there is no even investigation on it in Project Blue Book's files. But he tried for all the different departments, and for 10 years was stymied to get any information about this. And at one point got as far as the Prime Minister's office, and they told him that was a criminal investigation, and they couldn't tell him anything. Of course, it wasn't a criminal investigation. It was just something was going on. And I sent a request into all the different departments, the Department of Defense, the National Research Council, everything, and there isn't a single bit of information on this anywhere. Yet it happened, and but what it was, who knows? There's a next door neighbor that claims he actually saw a thing land, and his time is a little off, but because he has the same experience, only it lands in his field. But he does go over to Joe Border's farm, and at one point he sees a whole bunch of people with Geiger counters and military uniforms, and he's prevented from going on the farm by a colonel who claims he's with the United States Air Force, and the colonel also claims he's with Project Blue Book. Of course, this is 1974, and Project Blue Book ended in 69, so I don't know what happened there. Nobody seems to know, but except that they believe something landed, and it probably wasn't a tanker truck. But what happened after that, who knows? That's why it's still called a Canadian UFO mystery.
Yes. Project Blue Book officially may be over. Unofficially, it may still be going on.
Yeah, that's what I think, under a different name. And I'm sure there's all kinds of things that are going on that, that we don't know about. And if you get close, they'll just say something else is happening. So I'm always amazed that I look at all the, the UFO television shows that have sprung up lately, and they seem so compelling, the evidence that they're showing you, and then they tell you what the government's reaction was, and it's always Venus or swamp gas, or the police officers are chasing the moon, and it just makes no sense whatsoever what the authorities are saying.
The most compelling stories, in my opinion, of UFOs are those that come from pilots, that when they are flying their planes, a lot of them will say that they've experienced UFOs, something that they cannot explain, and they are experienced pilots. They know all sorts of planes.
And even the people on the ground, like so many pilots have seen things, and even the Arizona Lights, there were a lot of, veteran Army people that flew jets in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and they know what a plane looks like, and they said that wasn't it. Even Ronald Reagan, there's a story when he was aboard a plane, a private jet one time as president, they saw something up in the sky. So, I mean, all these people are not crazy, so they are seeing something.
Yeah, I know.
It's just the people that don't want them to tell. They make them think they're crazy.
My dad served in Vietnam in 1965 through 66. He was an aviation engineer, and I remember him telling me several years ago, actually, that he had seen some type of craft that he could not explain. It's nothing that he has ever seen, even today.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you saw it. There was a show on. Now, I can't remember. It was Hangar One last week, or there's a show called Unseen Alien Files. It's on Saturday afternoon sometime. But they talked about a 1968 incident in the Vietnam War that I really hadn't heard about before. But there were all kinds of people that said the Navy fired on several UFOs, and when they fired on them, the UFO returned the same fire that they had fired on them. And boats had been sunk by UFOs.
Wow.
Yeah, they would. The bullets that came back were the same bullets that they had fired out. Which it's a story I had never heard before, but they had all these Vietnam War veterans on there talking about it. So it's hard to believe they would make something up like that, but stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened, yes. And this is the far side, so strange things will happen. Just like earlier when I could not call you.
Yeah, who knows what was going on there.
Oh, I know.
I don't know how much more time we have. I just wanted to mention a few more things about one of the ladies that are in my book, Marianne Anderson. She's
yes.
Completely deaf, and when I was doing research, I couldn't find any other deaf experiencer anywhere in the world that had ever been written about, which in itself is kind of interesting. But there may be other deaf experiences out there. They just haven't come forward. But you can imagine how difficult it is for somebody that's deaf to explain what has happened to them.
Oh, yes.
They've lived all their life in this world of silence, and Marianne, kept this basically for 50 years hidden until somebody would take her seriously, and I happened to be that somebody. And the interesting thing about her is that when I first met her, I had a lot of difficulty understanding her. When she talks without a sign language, you really can't make out a lot of words that she's talking about, but she's so energetic. I think she's thinking faster than is coming out of her mouth. Eventually, when we had sign languages, interpreters sit down with us to do the interviews, I was able to understand her a lot more, and I must have done 3 or 4 2 or 3 hour interviews with her this way, and now she's opened up so much that now when she talks, I can actually understand her without the sign language people. She's able to actually pronunciate very good, and we've had some meetings, MUFON meetings up here in Brantford, where she's actually got up and talked to the people that have gathered. So she's had a complete change of life just by talking about this and getting it off her shoulders. A great weight is lifted off her shoulders. But again, I don't know how many deaf experiences out there are, or she's one of the few. They obviously took an interest in her, unlike a lot of other people.
Yeah, and I also wonder how many experiencers might be blind and how they would react to this, because they can't see what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that would be very terrifying because she could hear. Marianne could see but not hear, so she couldn't hear them coming, whereas the other people could hear them coming. Although they all say that when they're about to have an experience, they know that it's about to happen because there's just something that feels different around them. Their whole sense of reality is altered in some way. That they know something is about to happen. A blind person, that is, I mean, I don't know if there are either.
Yeah, I have to wonder, because I know from reading a book that these alien beings will send a message to the mind, say, don't worry, we're not going to hurt you, you are fine.
Yeah.
If they might do something similar to a blind person, but show themselves to the mind.
Maybe, but
And make it a peaceful image.
Has anybody ever written about one? Or has a blind person ever come forward? I don't know.
I would imagine they would be terrified.
Yeah, in today's internet, I mean, you can find just about anything. One of the other theories that I think it was Kelly, but it might have been Kelly and Jackie that mentioned to me is that, you know, they think that whoever these beings are, they're getting so good at controlling the scenarios, controlling the people that maybe today that they're able to do it and people don't even know they've been abducted anymore. And they fear that less and less people are actually going to be coming forward because they don't have any idea they've been part of an experiment, that it's just completely taken out of their mind. Which is, again, interesting because the people in my book are all between the ages of 50 and 60, and this has happened to them. So maybe people that are, you know, in their 20s and 30s now, they have no idea it's happening.
Yeah. What if this whole life that we live, the world we live in, it's all one gigantic experiment and we don't realize it? We are nothing more than guinea pigs.
Yeah. My wife says that all the time, that my wife's brother died 30, 40 years ago, and she's always had this dream that they used to always talk about UFOs, and he says to her, he says, "See, Kim, we are living on a spaceship." And that's always stuck with her. Like, what if this whole scenario that we're living in really is like the Matrix?
Yes.
We just don't know it.
Well, you know, science is now coming out with the actual belief that the world we're living in, the universe, everything is a hologram.
Yeah, I heard that too. And then, who knows? I mean, there's so many things that probably aren't the way we think it is, that anything's possible.
There was another portion of your book that really stood out to me, and that is, while most of the individuals could not fight off these abductions, there was one particular individual who, this individual was strong-willed enough that the aliens just decided, we're not going to deal with you. We're going to come back another day. But this person kept fighting these people off.
Yeah, Jackie had that too. Kelly had that too. Pierre Mahar is he's interesting in the sense that he doesn't believe he ever was actually abducted. But his most terrifying thing, and it really was so terrifying that when I first met him, he was shaking, and he would have just crawled out of his skin if he had not met me and heard your introduction tonight, because I was talking in front of the group saying, you know, one of the theories is they come through the walls, and when I said that, I could see this person in, you know, 3 rows down, just almost shaking and becoming very emotional, and he was sweating and his arms were flailing, and it turns out this was Pierre Mahar, who was born in Montreal and is a musician, and he actually used to play with a group called Whiskey Hollow, which was one of Canada's first country rock bands. And he told me afterwards that his biggest fear of his entire life was he had been working with a friend, and that friend, can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wondered where my phone went. I just dropped it. I couldn't find it. I was talking to myself here. Anyways, they came home and they were going to meet for a beer afterwards, and he lived over top of a shop where his father owned, and he didn't have a couch or anything. He had a bed, so they put against the wall, and he had a small TV, and he made himself a cup of coffee and relaxed on the bed to watch some TV. And as he was watching the TV, he had this feeling that something wasn't right in his apartment, and it was so strong that he had this feeling that there was a presence in the apartment, like somebody was there. So he gets up and he goes to the kitchen, he looks around, and there's nothing there, and he, he thinks he's, just overly sensitive or something, and he's back down, he's drinking his cup of coffee, and all of a sudden he has the same feeling again, and he slowly turns toward the wall, and this wall suddenly looks like a ripple water again, but the entire wall looks like, and then there's an opening in the wall, and as he's staring, he sees these giant humanoid creatures putting a foot through and then an arm through, and he's so scared, he doesn't stick around to see what's going to happen, and he has this immense feeling that they are menacing and mean him nothing but harm. He drops the coffee, he runs out of the bedroom, down the outdoor, down the stairs, and runs down the street, and never goes back to that apartment ever again the rest of his life. He gets his friends to go get all his belongings, and that stayed with him his entire life until he started talking to me about it. And when he first started talking to me about it, he was still shaking and very scared, and we actually put him under hypnosis. And he, when he got to that part of it, he was frightening and he was scared stiff. And but the more he talked about it, the more the fear went away. And the last time I talked to him about it, he wasn't scared one bit. He still wish he could go deeper in hypnosis to find out what it actually was, but he can now talk about it without this fear.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a strong guy, but I don't think he'd be able to fight. He says they were 8 feet tall and they were muscular and looked like, they didn't look like the bug people. They just looked like a humanoid giant wrestler coming through, like the Hulk, I guess, coming through.
Yeah.
And there was two of them. So I often go by that same apartment, and every time I go by, I look up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think he goes by it anymore, but it's just a strange feeling. But people do, they want to, do everything they can to try to break the grip that they have on them. But once they take over from your mind and your body, there's not much you can do. You just sort of have to go along with the ride, I think.
Mm-hmm. I could imagine that muscular alien would say something like, well, you know what, alien maniacs, we're going to snap into a human.
Yeah, maybe. If he had stayed long enough in there, who knows what they would have looked like to him. But, none of these people mention anything like that to me other than him.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, maybe they knew that somehow deep there was a fear of that in him. And they weren't playing around. They just wanted to... Maybe they're playing a joke. Maybe they like to play practical tricks. They like to see how far they can push the human mind.
Yeah, until they break us.
Yeah, and but it was interesting when he was under hypnosis for that. He suddenly recalled something as a 6-year-old in a Catholic monastery in a convent in Montreal, where he was visiting a grandmother, and his mother was in the bed with her, and he went playing down the hall and ended up in a room, and suddenly the wall opened up again, and this alien type face was coming through the wall. But being a 5 or 6-year-old brought up in a Catholic environment, he thought he was looking at the devil, and he just screamed right through. And he had never told his wife about that. He told his wife about everything else, and when it came out in the hypnosis, she was as surprised as anybody else was.
Mm-hmm.
So these things are locked away, I think, in your mind until somehow you reach far enough back to pull something out.
Yes, it's just like a broken mirror. You can look into it, but it's all in pieces.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have any sense that you were experimented on, as far as you know, in any of the things you did.
Not as far as I know. Mm-mm.
That could have been interesting.
No, I know. I've thought about going through hypnotherapy, but I really don't know if I want to do that. Because, I mean, What if it was painful? What if they did things to me I don't really want to know about? What if I was replaced with a clone and I'm not really who I think I am?
Yeah. Well, I that are things to think about. Although I'm told that when you go under hypnosis, they can actually do something to make you feel no pain. But then I don't know how you would ever have the same experience if you didn't actually experience what you experienced. You just sort of they want you to sort of look at it as if you're looking at a movie. I think the best regressive hypnotism happens when you are allowed to experience everything. I think if somehow they block the pain and block you from being afraid, I don't think you're getting as true experience as you can.
Yeah.
And that is a trade-off. Do you want to experience that or not? It could be very traumatic and very life-changing to you.
The question is truly, is there anything to fear? Why are they coming here? Why are they abducting the human population? That they could be eating us, they could be cloning us, they could be doing a number of things to us. But we just don't know.
We don't know, and as I mentioned, this mother-daughter that is not in the book, but I'm hoping to write something about them in the future. She told me a story that I had never heard before, and she only told me a very small snippet of it. And I'll recount some of what she told me, and then you and your listeners can judge whether they're here to harm us or not. As I said, she never experienced any grays. She only experienced these hooded creatures dragging her out of the bed. She did experience reptilians, and to her, the reptilians were very nice people. There was nothing to fear. They looked very alarming, but they were very, very intelligent and very, generally kind. The people that she feared the most, though, were the humanoid type aliens, because she says she was taken to a factory, and she calls it the horror factory. And if what she says really happened, then it really is a horror factory. She says her and other abductees are standing by a conveyor belt, and they're all naked. They got no clothes on whatsoever. And coming down this conveyor belt are a bunch of cats and dogs and other animals. And every one of them has a knife in their hand, and they're ordered to stab these animals as they're coming down the conveyor belt.
Wow.
That is horrifying enough, but there's another incident where she's there, and she claims she's not taking part of this. She's standing off to the side. Now, I don't know whether that's just her defensive mechanism kicking in, but in this other scenario, instead of animals coming down this conveyor belt, there are human body parts coming down the conveyor belt. But she said it's the humanoid characters that are the ones that are the mean people. They're the ones that are, the fear mongers. Whoever they are, I don't know. She said they weren't Nords. They just looked like us, but she knew that they weren't us.
What if they were human, but they were members of a cult?
Well, I don't know. But what are the reptilians doing, standing there watching too?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's like, they get other people to do their dirty work. We're nice, but these people aren't, but we're controlling these people. So
yeah, it's just like with the mantids. There's usually the grays are with the mantids, right? Yeah, and the grays are doing the dirty work, and the mantids are the people in control. But there's usually only one mantid there at any time. There's not a whole bunch of mantids. There's just one. I think one's all you need to deal with. One ugly mantid. That's it. Yeah,
and it's kind of strange that it's a praying mantis too. I mean, I don't know why we'd think that's what an alien would look like, or why such an alien does look like that. But, they do. I mean, Kelly thought when this praying mantis-like creature moved, that they moved very gracefully across the room, and they had almost human quality to them. When Jackie saw hers, it had a distinct movement of her arm. She says it went 3 times before the arm extended itself. And when you think about insects, sometimes you see an insect with like jerky motions. Our arms just go down, but theirs was like 3 different movements before the arm was extended. And they were wearing uniforms too. I mean, Kelly's looked like in a lab coat. So she called it the doctor, and Jackie's was in it was almost a translucent almost like cape. She describes it as. You could see through it, but it was some kind of material there, although it was a see-through.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been the same thing, but Kelly's a 10-year-old, and she's a doctor, and when Jackie sees it, she's in her 30s, I think, so she doesn't need to look at it as a doctor.
Yeah. The mantids will wear a white doctor type of outfit, and the Greys are nude, right?
Well, I guess, are they nude, or is it just some kind of material around them? I don't know.
Well, that is true. It may just be a gray uniform. That might not even be their appearance.
Yeah, and their big eyes, apparently, there's light sensitive, so that could just be, a night vision type thing that they have. And their eyes really are not that big, but nobody seems to have a memory of that.
Yeah. I've always wondered if the gray aliens might have been that whole look that we think of them, that it may just be an outfit, just like with our astronauts. We send them to space, we send them to Mars or whatever. That's not how they look. They're wearing something to help them survive in that atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the drawings that you found on the walls in ancient Egypt and all around the world. I mean, there's all kinds of pictures of things that look like our astronauts with helmets on, right? So it's quite conceivable that whoever came down, especially the humanoid type creatures, they needed masks like that until they found out that their atmosphere was okay. But the Greys, I mean, they're always. I don't think most people ever see a Grey in the daytime. It's always at nighttime. So that would explain why they need the night vision. The day that the sunlight's just too bright on them.
Yeah. Reading your book, one of the things I thought was funny is that I forgot exactly who it was out of all the people you interviewed, but they saw what appeared to be a clown, and then the clown turned out to be an alien.
Yeah, well, I mean, how many times have you heard people describe that clowns are either their best friends or they hate clowns, they're afraid of clowns growing
Exactly.
up? Yeah, and she never liked clowns at all. She hated clowns, and so perhaps they got that kind of mixed up when they made her see a clown, because they probably thought most people like clowns. And and then it wasn't until she had another experience when she saw these little troll-like creatures with the gnarly teeth that she realized that the clown had these gnarly teeth, and that she didn't see a clown, but she actually saw this gnarly troll that made it look like a clown. But again, another example of a scenario. Everybody is put in a scenario one way or another. Whether it's, and then the scenario usually ends up you're on a spaceship somewhere. Although, when I was writing this book, I was, I called them experiencers, which seems to be the term that a lot of abductees want to be called now, because even after writing this book, I'm not sure that what all the people that I interviewed experienced was an actual abduction, because I guess in a sense it's abduction because they were taken against their will, but in some cases they may never have left their bedroom. They just experienced it in their bedroom, experienced it in their house. Even when Kelly was walking into the spaceships on what she thought was a house, she's voluntarily walking in, experiencing something there rather than being, forcibly taken. So maybe abduction has been the wrong word we've been using all these years. Unless you're taken like Barney and Betty Hill as you're standing on the road, or Travis Walton as you're standing there.
Yeah.
But other people seem to be experiencing these things without really, being forcibly taken out of their house.
Yeah. What if these experiences are not physical whatsoever, that the aliens never go into the person's house whatsoever? It's all projected to them.
Projected to them, but somehow they undergo something.
Yeah, but they can remember it.
Yeah. Well, that would explain going through the walls. I mean, because they always come through the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And come through. I mean, they usually come through the walls rather than come through a window, which makes you figure out, well, why wouldn't they just come through a window, or why wouldn't they just open a door?
Yeah, just knock on the door, see if anybody will let you in.
Yeah, like, or just turn the doorknob and come in. You know, like, why come through the walls? Maybe if they are holograms, that's the way they get projected.
Could be. Then again, they might have a way to manipulate the physics as we understand it.
Well, maybe it's like the Great Wizard of Oz, where he's standing behind a curtain and projecting his big face, and that's what there's some little person in a spaceship, and he's not very threatening whatsoever, but he projects himself as something else.
Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, Michael Jackson. A lot of things to think about.
Yes. Well, Bob, I've definitely appreciated spending this night with you.
I've enjoyed it too.
Before we go, is there anything you would like to share with the audience? Any upcoming workshops, any speaking arrangements, your website?
Yes. Brantford actually is going to host. I have really nothing to do with it, other than the fact I'm going to be one of the guest speakers. But it's called the Alien Cosmic Expo, June 26th, 27th, and 28th in Brantford, and 24 world-class speakers are coming to a conference here, and they include Jason Martell of Ancient Aliens, Stanton Friedman will be there, Grant Cameron will be there, Paul Hellyer, he'll be there, and they're going to be talking about alien government cover-ups. There'll be psychic mediums, there'll be ancient Egyptian talks, and it's 3 days of, if you're into this stuff, this is the place to be. And it's, they're just starting to publicize it now, and Canadian-American speakers are going to be there. So that should be really interesting. I'm going to be part of that. And as I said, the books are available on, I guess there's a connection at your website, and they're available on Amazon.com. And I think you can go to Barnes & Noble now and click on the title, and you can order it through there too. And I'm also teamed up with a guy named Justin Peeler. He's a bright young guy here in Brantford who's a videographer and a film producer. And we're kicking around the idea of taking my book and turning it into either a docu-film or a YouTube-type mini features, where instead of being a documentary, we'll actually do mini movies on it. Instead of having somebody talk over it, it'll be a reenactment. So we're hoping to start that pretty soon. So a lot of exciting things coming down the pipe, I hope.
Sounds like it. And I believe the reenactment videos will be very popular. Yeah.
And I've also started a new news service with a friend of mine, Tom Godfrey, called Toronto Newswire Services. We're sort of taking on the big boys that do news services now. So if anybody has an event to publicize, we'll write it, or we can send out their press releases to whoever they want anywhere in the world, basically, for a lot less expensive than some of the other companies do.
Do you have a website for that?
Yeah, TorontoNewsWire.com.
Okay.
And on Twitter, it's at Toronto Newswire. And my Twitter handle is at thepitbull123.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I definitely appreciate this. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Okay. If time travel were real here and today, where would you go to and what would you do?
Oh, jeez. If time travel were real. Can I go 2 places?
Sure. You can go a gazillion places if you want to.
I'd love to go in the future about 500 years at least, just to see how far we advanced, and hopefully we're still around. And I think I'd like to go back to ancient Egypt to see the pyramids being made and to see what really happened.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Bob Mitchell.